Sienna God, hello all. It's just a yeah, good evening, and Wado, thank you for watching. Today is day 10, part B of reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, an inquiry into values by Robert M. Persig. But that's right, Deweese says. You know how cold it is up there. You used to spend all your time up there. It brings back memories, I say. A single fragment comes to mind now of night winds all around a campfire smaller than this one before us now, sheltered in the rock against the high wind because there are no trees. Next to the fire are cooking gear and backpacks to help give wind shelter, and a canteen filled with water gathered from the melting snow. The water had to be collected early because above the timberline the snow stops melting when the sun goes down. Deweese says, "You've changed a lot." He is looking at me searchingly. His expression seems to ask whether this is a forbidden topic or not, and he gathers from looking at me that it is. He adds, "I guess we all have." I reply, "I'm not the same person at all," and this seems to put him a little more at ease. Were he aware of the literal truth of that, he'd be a lot less at ease. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure. A lot has happened, I say, and some things have come up that have made it important to try to untangle them a little, in my own mind at least, and that's partly why I'm here. He looks at me expecting something more, but the art instructor and his wife appear by the fireside and we drop it. The wind sounds like there'll be a storm tonight, the instructor says. I don't think so, Deweese says. Chris returns with the sweaters and asks if there are any ghosts up in the canyon. Deweese looks at him with amusement. No, but there are wolves, he says. Chris thinks about this and asks, what do they do? Deweese says, they make trouble for the ranchers, he frowns. They kill the young calves and lambs. Do they chase people? I've never heard of it, Deweese says, and then seeing that this disappoints Chris adds, but they could. At dinner, the brook trout is accompanied by glasses of Bay County Chablis, Chablis. We sit separately in chairs and sofas around the living room. One entire side of this room has the windows which would overlook the canyon, except that now it's dark outside and the glass reflects the light from the fireplace. The glow of the fire is matched by an inner glow from the wine and fish, and we don't say much except murmurs of appreciation. Sylvia murmurs to John to notice the large pots and vases around the room. I was noticing those, John says. Fantastic. Those were made by Peter Voulkas, Voulkas, Sylvia says. Is that right? He was a student of Mr. Deweese. Oh, for Christ's sake, I almost kicked one of those over. Deweese laughs. Later, John mumbles something and a few times looks up and announces, this does it. This just does the whole thing for us. Now we can go back for another 8 years on 2649 Colfax Avenue. Sylvia says mournfully, let's not talk about that. John looks at me for a moment. I suppose anybody with friends who can provide an evening like this can't be all bad. He nods gravely. I'm going to have to take back all those things I thought about you. What? Anyway, all of them? I ask. Some, anyway. Deweese and the instructor smile, and some of the impasse goes away. After dinner, Jack and Wyla Barness arrive. Barsness, Barsness, arrive. More living images. Jack is recorded in the tomb fragments as a good person who writes and teaches English at the college. Their arrival is followed by that of a sculptor from northern Montana who herds sheep for his income. I gather from the way Deweese introduces him that I'm not supposed to have met him before. Deweese says he is trying to persuade the sculptor to join the faculty, and I say I'll try to talk him out of it and sit down next to him. But conversation is very sticky because the sculptor is extremely serious and suspicious, evidently because I'm not an artist. He acts like I'm a detective trying to get something on him. And it isn't until he discovers I do a lot of welding that I become okay. It's like, that'll do. Motorcycle maintenance opens strange doors. He says he welds for some of the same reasons I do. After you pick up skill, welding gives a tremendous feeling of power and control over the metal. You can do anything. He brings out some photographs of things he has welded, and these show beautiful birds and animals with flowing metal surface textures that are not like anything else. Later, I move over and talk with Jack and Wyla. Willa, probably Willa, Wylla. Jack is leaving to head an English department down in Boise, Idaho. His attitudes toward the department here seem guarded but negative. They would be negative, of course, or he wouldn't be leaving. I seem to remember now he was a fiction writer mainly who taught English rather than a systematic scholar who taught English. There was a continuing split in the department along these lines, which in part gave rise to, or at least accelerated, the growth of Phaedrus. Phaedrus, this wild set of ideas which no one else had ever heard of. And Jack was supportive of Phaedrus because although he wasn't sure he knew what Phaedrus was talking about, he saw it was something a fiction writer could work with better than linguistic analysis. It's an old split, like the one between art and art history. One does it, and the other talks about how it's done, and the talk about how it's done never seems to match how one does it. You know, I think that's true because, I mean, I don't know. In like the art world, you can just describe the feelings that you felt, the things that you saw, the ideas that flowed in, and how everything just went so seamlessly, or how they didn't, and then they all just came back together, and no one will ever realize, like, they'll never feel it. Kind of like when you, like, say you go on vacation and you see something that words just can't describe. So like if you go like to the Grand Canyon, or you go to any place that leaves you breathless, speechless, whatever, and you're like taking photos, and then you want to share those photos, and they literally just look like, I don't know, just any other photo of the fill in the blank, right? But, and even when the person goes back later, they don't feel all the same exact feelings in that moment. They can kind of remember that they felt euphoric or whatever it was, but you just cannot capture it. It's almost as if you would need, I don't know, something that we don't have here, that we're not accustomed to or haven't been told that's even a thing, where it can attach a feeling, a consciousness, a frequency, or whatever it is, and like just the way that you saw it, you took it in, and then that person can feel and see that and stuff. I don't know. Anyway, let's see. Deweese brings over some instructions for assembly of an outdoor barbecue rotisserie, which he wants me to evaluate as a professional technical writer. He spent a whole afternoon trying to get the thing together, and he wants to see these instructions totally damned. And what I was getting at is that, like, that can occur with anything. So, like, even if, like, somebody who's writing something, the ebbs and flows of that, and the feelings and all of that, right? It may or may not resonate when you read it. Anyway. But as I read them, they look like ordinary instructions to me, and I'm at a loss to find anything wrong with them. I don't want to say this, of course, so I hunt hard for something to pick on. You can't really tell whether a set of instructions are all right until you check them against the device or procedure they describe. But I see a page separation that prevents reading without flipping back and forth between the text and illustration, always a poor practice. I jump on this very hard, and Deweese encourages every jump. Chris takes the instructions to see what I mean. But while I'm jumping on this and describing some of the agonies of misinterpretation that bad cross-referencing can produce, I have a feeling that this isn't why Deweese found them so hard to understand. It's just a lack of smoothness and continuity which threw him off. He's unable to comprehend things when they appear in the ugly, chopped-up, grotesque sentence style common to engineering and technical writing. Science works with chunks and bits and pieces of things with the continuity presumed, and Deweese works only with the continuities of things with the chunks and bits and pieces presumed. What he really wants me to... What? I've never heard it used like this. What he really wants me to damn is the lack of artistic continuity. And damn is spelled D-A-M-N. Is lack of artistic continuity. Something an engineer couldn't care less about. It hangs up really on the classic romantic split like everything else about technology. But Chris, meanwhile, takes the instructions and folds them around in a way I hadn't thought of, so that the illustration sits there right next to the text. I double take this, then triple take it, and feel like a movie cartoon character who has just walked beyond the edge of a cliff, but hasn't fallen yet because he hasn't realized his predicament. I nod, and there's silence. And then I realize my predicament. Then a long laughter as I pound Chris on the top of the head all the way down to the bottom of the canyon. When the laughter subsides, I say, well, anyway, the laughter starts all over again. What I wanted to say, I finally get in, is that I have a set of instructions at home which opens up great realms for the improvement of technical writing. They begin. Assembly of Japanese bicycle require great peace of mind. This produces more laughter. But Sylvia and Jeannie and the sculptor give sharp looks of recognition. That's a good instruction, the sculptor says. Jeannie nods too. That's kind of why I saved it, I say. At first I laughed because of memories of bicycles I'd put together and of course the unintended slur on Japanese manufacture. But there's a lot of wisdom in that statement. John looks at me apprehensively. I look at him with equal apprehension. We both laugh, he says. The professor will now expound. Peace of mind isn't at all superficial, really, I expound. It's the whole thing. That which produces it is good maintenance. That which disturbs it is poor maintenance. What we call workability of the machine is just an objectification of this peace of mind. The ultimate test always your own serenity. If you don't have this when you start and maintain it while you're working, you're likely to build your personal problems right into the machine itself. They just look at me thinking about this. It's an unconventional concept, I say, but conventional reason bears it out. The material object of observation, the bicycle or rotisserie, can't be right or wrong. Molecules are molecules. They don't have any ethical codes to follow except these people give them. Those people give them. The test of the machine is the satisfaction it gives you. There isn't any other test. If the machine produces tranquility, it's right. If it disturbs you, it's wrong, until either the machine or your mind is changed. The test of the machine's always your own mind. The test of the machine's always your own mind. There isn't any other test. Right. I never thought of it like that. Deweese asked, what if the machine is wrong and I feel peaceful about it? Laughter. I reply, that's self-contradictory. If you really don't care, you aren't going to know it's wrong. The thought will never occur to you. The act of pronouncing it wrong's a form of caring. If you really don't care, you aren't going to know it's wrong. I add, what's more common is that you feel unpeaceful, even if it's right. And I think that's the actual case here. In this case, if you're worried it isn't right, that means it isn't checked out thoroughly enough. And in an industrial situation, a machine that isn't checked out is a down machine and can't be used even though it may work perfectly. Your worry about the rotisserie is the same thing. You haven't completed the ultimate requirement of achieving peace of mind because you feel these instructions were too complicated and you may not have understood them correctly. Deweese asks, well, how would you change them so I could get this peace of mind? That would require a lot more study than I've just given them now. The whole thing goes very deep. These rotisserie instructions begin and end exclusively with the machine. The kind of approach I'm thinking about doesn't cut it off so narrowly. What's really angering about instructions of this sort is that they imply there's only one way to put this rotisserie together, their way, and that presumption wipes out all creativity. Actually, there are hundreds of ways to put the rotisserie together, and when they make you follow just one way without showing you the overall problem, the instructions become hard to follow in such a way as not to make mistakes. You lose feeling for the work, and not only that, it's very unlikely that they've told you the best way. Well, that's true. But they're from the factory, John says. I'm from the factory too, I say, and I know how instructions like this are put together. You go out on the assembly line with a tape recorder and a foreman sends you to talk to the guy he needs least. The biggest goof-off he's got, and whatever he tells you, that's the instructions. The next guy might have told you something completely different and probably better, but he's too busy. They all look surprised. I might have known, Deweese says. It's the format, I say. No writer can buck it. Technology presumes there's just one right way to do things, and there never is. And when you presume there's just one right way to do things, of course the instructions begin and end exclusively with the rotisserie. But if you have to choose among an infinite number of ways to put it together, then the relation of the machine to you and the relation of the machine and you to the rest of the world has to be considered. Because the selection from among many choices, the art of the work, is just as dependent upon your own mind and spirit as it is upon the material of the machine. That's why you need the peace of mind. Actually, this idea isn't so strange, I continue. Sometimes at a novice workman, or bad workman and compare his expression with that of a craftsman whose work you know is excellent, and you'll see the difference. The craftsman isn't ever following a single line of instruction. He's making decisions as he goes along. For that reason, he'll be absorbed and attentive to what he's doing, even though he doesn't deliberately contrive this. His motions and the machine are in a kind of harmony. He isn't following any set of written instructions because the nature of the material at hand determines his thoughts and motions, which simultaneously change the nature of the material at hand. The material and his thoughts are changing together in a progression of changes until his mind's at rest. At the same time, the material is right. Sounds like art, the instructor says. Well, it is art, I say. This divorce of art from technology is completely unnatural. It's just that it's gone on so long you have to be an archaeologist to find out where the two were separated. Rotisserie assembly is actually a long-lost branch of sculpture, so divorced from its roots by centuries of intellectual wrong turns that just to associate the two sounds ludicrous. They're not sure whether I'm kidding or not. You mean, Deweese asks, that when I was putting this rotisserie together, I was actually sculpting it? Sure. He goes over this in his mind, smiling more and more. I wish I'd known that, he said. Laughter follows. Chris says he doesn't understand what I'm saying. That's all right, Chris, Jack Barsness says. We don't either. More laughter. I think I'll just stay with ordinary sculpture, the sculptor says. I think I'll just stick to painting, Deweese says. I think I'll just stick to drumming, John says. Chris asks, what are you going to stick to? My guns, boy, my guns, I tell him. That's the code of the West. They all laugh hard at this, and my speechifying seems forgiven. When you've got a Chautauqua in your head, it's extremely hard not to inflict it onto innocent people. The conversation breaks up into groups, and I spend the rest of the party talking to Jack and Willa about developments in the English department. After the party is over and the Sutherlands and Chris have gone to bed, Deweese recalls my lecture. However, he says seriously, what you said about the rotisserie instructions was interesting. Jeannie adds, also seriously, it sounds like you had been thinking about it for a long time. I've been thinking about concepts that underlie it for 20 years, I say. Beyond the chair in front of me, sparks fly up the chimney, drawn by the wind outside, now stronger than before. I add almost to myself, you look at where you're going and where you are, and it never makes sense. But then you look back at where you've been, and a pattern seems to emerge. And if you project forward from that pattern, then sometimes you can come up with something. All that talk about technology and art is part of a pattern that seems to have emerged from my own life. It represents a transcendence from something I think a lot of others may be trying to transcend. What's that? Well, it isn't just art and technology. It's a kind of non-coalescence between reason and feeling. What's wrong with technology is that it's not connected in any real way with matters of the spirit and of the heart. That's true. And so it does blind, ugly things quite by accident. It gets hated for that. People haven't paid much attention to this before because the big concern has been with food, clothing, and shelter for everyone, and technology has provided these. But now, where these are assured, the ugliness is being noticed more and more, and people are asking if we must always suffer spiritually and aesthetically in order to satisfy material needs. Lately, it's become almost a national crisis. Anti-pollution drives, anti-technological communes and styles of life and all that. Both Deweese and Jeannie have understood all this for so long there's no need for comment, so I add, what's emerging from the pattern of my own life is the belief that the crisis is being caused by the inadequacy of existing forms of thought to cope with the situation. It can't be solved by rational means because irrationality itself is the source of the problem. The only ones who are solving it at a personal level by abandoning square rationality altogether and going by feelings alone, like John and Sylvia here, and millions of others like them. And that seems like a wrong direction too. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the solution to the problem isn't that you abandon reality, but that you expand the nature of rationality so that it's capable of coming up with a solution. I guess I don't know what you mean, Jeannie says. Well, it's quite a bootstrap operation. It's analogous, analogous to the kind of hang-up Sir Isaac Newton had when he wanted to solve problems of instantaneous rates of change. And we'll leave it at that. Don't go, hey, Rena Guchanowski. Till we meet again. Love you, mean it.